Have you ever wondered why the Biden administration completely opened the borders in January of 2021? There were caravan after caravan of migrants lined up at the border, waiting for his inauguration. 15 million plus people entered the country, unvetted, no place to go, flooding our city streets and straining our welfare system. Also, have you ever thought about the fact that some who arrived on these shores since the 1900s seem to step right in the rhythm of American society, where others find it difficult to adapt to American culture? What invisible force might explain that difference? One that goes beyond language, laws, or even opportunity. Consider the very last words of our founding document, the Declaration of Independence. Listen closely to them. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Why do you suppose Thomas Jefferson and the founders chose to end with our sacred honor? Was it mere rhetoric? Or did they place it last because they saw it as the most precious thing they could risk? Their integrity, their word as an unbreakable bond. Now step back further into history. Jefferson's own roots trace to world transformed after the Norman conquest of 1066, when ancient warrior codes began to blend with Christian teachings. What arose from that meeting? Chivalry. The ideals of courage, loyalty, self-mastery, the protection of women and the weak, and the ability to keep their oaths. Isn't that the very essence of sacred honor? From those knightly traditions came the family crests, the coats of arms, the notion that a man's word was his lifeblood. Fast forward 149 years later, 1215, King John was forced to use the Magna Carta, the first time ever a ruler acknowledged that the law stood above even the king, securing property rights, fair trials, limits on taxation without consent. How profound was that shift in human affairs? And doesn't it resonate directly into the Declaration, which drew nourishment not only from the Magna Carta, but also the civic virtues of the Roman Republic, the moral framework of the Catholic Church, the Protestant Reformation, the artistic and intellectual development of the Italian Renaissance, and the Enlightenment's bold claims about individual liberty. So when our founders spoke of a new nation, they were drawing from a deep continuous stream, a heritage that was fundamentally Christian and European, one that prized personal honor and the rule of law above all power. For immigrants from the British Isles and later from much of Europe, including families like mine who arrived here in the late 1800s, it felt as though they had never truly left home. They shared Christianity, the Republican ideals, the cultural assumptions. They were familiar. Assimilation flowed naturally for them. In truth, for the first 189 years of our republic, from 1776 until 1965, that was largely who immigrated here. But what happened in 1965? The Immigration and Nationality Act, assembled by Democratic officials and signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. It fundamentally altered the path, moving away from preferences tied to those historical and cultural connections, and opened the doors for greater numbers of migration from dramatically different backgrounds and cultures. Not because those people lack worth, because some aren't decent people, but because different cultures hold different visions of history, authority, and of course, belonging. Imagine for a moment if Japan, which has the tightest immigration policies based on culture and economic standards, suddenly flung open its border doors, letting in tens of millions of Europeans, people from the Middle East, India, and beyond. In a few short generations, would Japan be the same country it is today? Unified? Safe? Or would observers look back and say it's been quietly transformed, or even overtaken, without a single battle? Here in America, when many newcomers arrive without an instinctive connection to the Founding Fathers, sometimes seeing them instead as figures of oppression, what follows? Especially when our schools place heavy emphasis on the sins of European history, while sidelining its contributions to human freedom. If we continue welcoming even larger waves while diminishing the very heritage that once made integration possible, What kind of nation are we handing to our children or our grandchildren? No one who cherishes their country, who honors those who came before, or who feels responsibility toward those yet unborn, would watch that inheritance fade. This isn't about belittling other cultures, trust me. They hold their own dignity, their richness, and their native soils. But doesn't America have the right to preserve its own distinct culture, its own hard-won heritage? So let's reflect honestly on immigration. Has it drifted far beyond balance? Yes. It might be time to return to something resembling the controlled selective approach we had before 1965, one more aligned with our historical identity. And shouldn't we teach our young people genuine history, not apology or guilt, but clear-eyed appreciation of who we are and the principles that built America? In part 2, we're going to dive into why this mass migration is occurring in America and why more division equals more power. Welcome to the Wiley Wire. Welcome to segment 1. Let's start with the hard numbers to set the stage, because without context, they don't land as hard. These come straight from the U.S. Census, Pew Research, and migration reports throughout 2025 and 2026. They paint a picture of a system that's been in complete overdrive until very recently. So the foreign-born population exploded to an all-time high of 53.3 million in January of 2025, right before Trump took office. That's 15.8% of the entire U.S. population. That's the highest level ever in our history. But just 6 months into Trump's term, it dropped to 51.9 million, 15.4%, marking the first real decline since the 1960s. Well, you ask why? Aggressive deportations, stricter border enforcement, and policy shifts under the current administration. They're finally taking charge. When you add immigrants, U.S.-born children, we're talking about 93 million people, nearly 28% of the country. That's a massive demographic footprint. Net international migration tells the story of the surge as well. 2.7 million arrivals since 2024 alone. An historic peak that drove population growth when birth rates were flattening. But in 2025, it halved up to about 1.3 million. And projections for 2026 are at near zero or even negative. If that crackdown continues, border encounters, they've skyrocketed in 2023, 2024, with millions crossing irregularly, only to plummet after 2024 election as new measures kicked in. So my take is we need to legalize illegal aliens who share our culture, pay taxes, and are productive in our society. We also need to resurrect some of the pre-1965 immigration policies, specifically the annual cap. Now, what that number is, I'll let the experts come up with that, but we definitely should go back to the old annual cap number. It should be a privilege to live in the United States. If you truly want to live here, you should learn English, demonstrate financial worth, pay taxes, and adopt American culture, as long as you come to America with this in mind. Some people come into this country with entirely different cultural beliefs, live freely in our country, and don't believe in any of America's fundamental values. The United States needs to crack down on this, because if they don't, it's going to be too late. Welcome to segment 2. Now let's get to the electoral math, because this is where the rubber meets the road. This stuff rarely gets talked about in the media, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It shapes everything from policy to protests. So those of you who don't know, Republicans already have a built-in edge toward the 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. And it's got nothing to do with voter suppression or some kind of grand conspiracy. It's just geography, plain and simple. Liberal states and cities have been overrun, and they have closed all pathways for a fair election. Democratic voters are packed into a small number of massive urban states and cities, think California, New York, where they rack up enormous margins, but those extra votes don't buy more electoral votes. It's a winner take all. Republicans, on the other hand, are more evenly distributed across a larger number of states, winning by slimmer margins that still delivers full electoral hauls. The Democrats have to dominate nearly every swing state just to break even, while Republicans can afford to lose a few and stay in the fight. This disadvantage is locked in before campaigns even start. Population migration. People are fleeing from high-cost, high-tax, overregulated blue states in droves, headed to affordable, growth-oriented red and red-leaning ones. California, New York, Illinois, Massachusetts are hemorrhaging residents, and with them, congressional seats, electoral votes. Meanwhile, Texas, Florida, Utah, Arizona, Idaho, South Carolina are booming. The census relocates power based on bodies, not party loyalty. Every seat that shifts from deep blue to red or purple territory jacks up the Republican baseline for the next election and the next 10 years. No amount of messaging or star candidates can outrun the math. It's baked into the system. Finally, party registration. Those trends are the quiet killer. In the states that track it, Republicans are surging. Democrats are flatlining and declining. Independents are exploding off of this. And registration isn't a lagging stat, it's a leading indicator that affects everything from volunteers to primary turnout, long-term party health. Even in Democratic strongholds, margins are eroding in the exact spots they can't afford to lose. This creates a compounding crisis with few viable paths to victory. Especially the steadily rising GOP floor from census shifts and weakening grassroots muscle. And immigration is an absolute must-have for Democrats. It promises to reshape demographics in their favor, fast, when they need it most. Without it, the math gets even uglier. The voter import strategy, let's build on that. Let's look at the math. Let's talk strategy, how migration becomes a tool for raw political power. Demographics aren't destiny, but they're close, and migration accelerates change like nothing else. Hispanics and Asians are the fastest growing demographic groups in America, and polling shows they've leaned heavily Democratic in recent cycles, offering them fast-track legal status, access to benefits, driver's licenses, and pathways to citizenship. You've got a shot at creating a massive loyal voting bloc concentrated in pivotal swing states like Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. This looks like importing voters to tote elections long-term, to me. It's not about compassion, it's about survival. That's why stepping up enforcement, deportations, border security doesn't spark measured debate. It ignites outright panic on one side because it threatens to dismantle their last big structural counterpunch. But here's where it gets personal. Think about your community. If migration surges, alters schools, neighborhoods, job markets, it fuels resentment. Yet for political machines, those human costs are secondary to electoral math. This strategy isn't new. It's been building since 1965, when the Immigration Act shifted priorities toward family reunification and diversity. Today, with birth rates plummeting, native populations aging, migration is the quickest way to redraw the map. The question is, whose map? And what point does this diversity cross into deliberate replacement? We'll tie this chaos in our next segment.
See an officer back there. He's alone and they're just throwing things at him. I mean, it's just pretty incredible that these protesters have overtaken this and there's no police. I don't see anybody here to kind of manage this crowd. So like I was saying, this is at the tail end of a very long day. Looks like they're cheering because they were able to push that officer back inside. Okay, and now people, okay, all right, hold on. Do you see the... Fuck you!
As you saw those two clips of Minneapolis and, of course, LA, this is definitely organized resistance. This isn't just a theory, it's exploding on the ground. Take the newly surfaced video from Alex Preddy from January 13th, about 11 days before he died. He was aggressively confronting federal agents in Minneapolis, spitting, shoving, resisting arrest, and even damaging a government vehicle. This was just weeks before he was shot on January 24th, during a separate protest against immigration enforcement operations. So, roll clip of Alex Preddy.
Moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Preddy interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him.
Reports say Preddy was carrying a legally permitted firearm. DHS confirms agents fired during a physical struggle, with officers now on administrative leave while the investigation goes on. The footage shatters earlier narratives of Preddy as a peaceful protester or innocent bystander. I'm going to play a clip of a CNN news anchor talking about Preddy, which is causing this mass violence. People all fired up about it. At some point, he was radicalized. I'm sure he was probably a good person most of his life, but the plan is to divide people here and turn them against each other. Innocent people die when this happens. What would possess someone to bring a loaded gun with 2 extra magazines? I don't know. I don't want anyone to die. But he's collateral damage that was orchestrated by the media, the mainstream media, government officials, and other propaganda that creates chaos and violence. This playbook has been used for hundreds of years. So I'm going to roll this clip of Alex Preddy, the CNN anchor, talking about Alex Preddy. Roll clip of the CNN anchor.
Close to they killed the wrong guy, right? Because this is like the perfect guy. Alex Preddy is the guy you would want to date your daughter. The guy you would want your son to grow up to be, a decent human being who was serving humanity, serving sick veterans, who is, there is nothing that has been said about that man that isn't wonderful. And so they can't malign him. They can't malign him because we have the videos.
I mean, these news anchors, they got to stop. I mean, you don't even know Alex Preddy. I don't know Alex Preddy. There's no reason to, gaslight this and cause people to just do things, innocent people to do things that are going to get them killed. We're at a flashpoint right now. This chaos is spreading like cancer. Protests against ICE have escalated to the point where federal officers are trapped in hotels in Minneapolis, surrounded by hostile crowds, chanting threats, with widespread property damage and graffiti. In some instances, local police have flat out refused to step in. This isn't grassroots frustration boiling over spontaneously. It's a coordinated resistance aimed at undermining federal authority in Democrat-controlled cities and states. It's amplified by local officials who seem to fuel the fire or at least tolerate the disorder. It's got hallmarks of a deliberate insurrection against federal law, potentially the start of a color revolution. This is so division. Broader issues, economic strain, foreign policy messes, collapsing social trust are just pouring gas on the fire. If this is left unchecked, this anti-federal sentiment, maybe even anti-Western, anti-traditional values, if this keeps growing and moving to other cities, pushing us towards real civil conflict, we're in trouble. So what can our government do? The options are limited and they have very high stakes. Here's some of the options. Stick with minimal intervention. Let locals handle it, which plays into the hands of those escalating for political gain and risking nationwide spread. Number 2, you can invoke the Insurrection Act, deploy federal troops, and crush this. But that's going to cause more death and destruction. And I don't think that's the best route to go, but it might be the only one. Or extend the olive branch to the administration. Reach out to Minnesota's governor, lieutenant governor, police chief, and mayor. Offer federal law enforcement aid and help de-escalate. But what I've been told is they already tried that. and they've refused. These officials don't care. It's about power, keeping it. Let's throw the clip of Governor Walz. He's fear-mongering. He's comparing this to Anne Frank. It's unbelievable.
I've got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota.
And means that we gloss over the deep inequities that exist in our state. We're one of the happiest states in the country. Our schools and healthcare systems are at the top of the list on all the lists that you want to be on top of. We've got a really incredible state. If you're white, if you are a person of color, if you are indigenous, if you are an immigrant or refugee, the opposite is true. As a Native American woman, it is not lost on me that I work in a system that was created in many ways to eliminate and erase me and our community as a whole. So I'm not interested in just making policy change here and there, but we also need to be in a place where we call white supremacy.
What are we doing here? Governor Walz and Peggy Flanagan, I added her clip at the end. They gotta get them out of office. This is harming people. This is promoting aggressiveness and violence. You can't compare this to Anne Frank, Germany, Nazism. It's gone way too far. And Peggy Flanagan talking about her indigenous roots. Come on. White guilt and all this stuff. We got to stop this. These are supposed to be leaders of our country. And all they are just violence-driven politicians hoping Alex Preddy deaths continue so they can get political power. Again, I'm going to tell you, I've said it 3 episodes now. Don't go to these things. They're dangerous. You don't know who you're around, and you can be the next Alex Preddy. Somebody that gets radicalized, shows up there, and you can be another victim. You got to counter this misinformation. We got to rebuild trust in institutions. The moment is existential. It has to happen. How the White House and state leaders respond will decide if we pull back from the brink or watch division tear us apart. Inaction isn't neutral, it's surrender. My next segment, I'm going to go over some of the NGOs behind this, and there's a clip from James O'Keefe. He did some undercover journalism. It's pretty wowing. I'm going to play that when we come back.
We secretly recorded talks about an organization called Make the Road New York. We've never heard of this organization, but apparently they have a budget of $30 million. They talk about one of the speakers that spoke earlier that day, April Veretti. April is the president of the SEIU labor union.
I mean, if you're interested in an immigrants' rights organization, you can look up Make the Road New York.
Make the Road New York.
Make the Road.
But who are you with?
I'm just with I'm with the union.
Oh.
Yeah. SEIU, Service Employees International.
We looked at the tax returns of Make the Road New York and found they're a registered 501c3 that file a 990, and they received $16 million in grants.
That's a clip from James O'Keefe, peeling back the curtain on who's organizing this. His videos are catching agitators like red-handed, admitting ties to a web of NGOs, unions, activist groups, driving the protests and pushing pro-migration agendas. He puts a major spotlight on this 501c3 called Make the Road New York. They're far from a small-time nonprofit. They're hauling in about $30 million annually, the $24.2 million in liabilities. They're showing consistent growth year after year. And, who's funding it? It's a mix of grants, private donations, and quite possibly taxpayer dollars. Through government programs, accusations are flying around about undocumented migrants and public benefits. They're helping them with driver's license and even facilitating voter registration efforts. So this isn't just support, it's strategic electoral engineering, building a dependable left-leaning voting bloc from the ground up. Right alongside them is Service Employees International Union, the SEIU, one of the largest labor unions in America, boasting millions of members. They're aggressively advocating for amnesty and open borders, which could explode their membership rolls and amplify their political muscle in Washington and state houses. Videos show their involvement in coordinating resistance, turning protests into tools for policy pressure. But this isn't random activism or genuine charity work. It's calculated power grabs, leveraging migration to reshape elections, consolidate influence, lock in long-term control. These groups provide humanitarian cover, but the end game is demographic dominance. That's what it's for. Our last segment, we're going to tie in political candidates and how they're getting this money from NGOs. They call them slush fund scandals. This has been going on for a while, and it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans too, but it's more blatant in the Democratic side. Now let's expand on the NGO web with a closer look at how these groups in states like Minnesota, Illinois, both Democratic strongholds, are tied to political funding scandals. It's not always direct, but the connections raise massive red flags about slush funds, where taxpayer money flows to nonprofits that indirectly prop up allied candidates. First, a legal primer. Under U.S. tax law, 501c3 nonprofits, the bulk of charitable NGOs, are flat out banned from directly or indirectly jumping into political campaigns. No funding candidates, no contributions to PACs, no endorsements, or they risk losing tax-exempt status. They can do nonpartisan voter education or advocacy, sure, but here's the loophole. Affiliated 501c4 social welfare programs or PACs can play politics. The individuals linked to NGOs can donate personally. In reality, it's called dark money. Snakes through networks, state or federal grants to NGOs might indirectly boost political allies via salaries, third-party channels, or slushy appropriations. Investigations hammer home how these setups push partisan agendas like open borders with Minnesota and Illinois under the microscope for fraud and potential laundering to connected politicians. Let's start in Minnesota. The state has been rocked by high-profile scandals where NGOs gobble up public funds, some linked to donations or outright fraud. Let's take Feeding Our Future, for example. I've talked about that in the past. They've embezzled $250 million in new child nutrition funds. So, they're basically billing for ghost meals. Defendants in the case donated to candidates. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry got $9,000 from 9 of them. Others include State Rep Mohammed Noor and many others. The scandal has sparked wider probes in Somali-linked nonprofits, with current administration expanding investigation into potential billions of dollars, that's billions of dollars in fraud, across major social programs. The NGO itself, though, as a 501c3, didn't directly fund anything, but individuals allegedly used the proceeds for personal donations. It's a classic end run. Then there's the Ramsey County NGOs. In 2025, the county, home to St. Paul, dished out $38.4 million to 213 nonprofits while slapping residents with 9.75 property tax hike. Critics like County Board candidate Sebastian Stoss are asking whether these funds indirectly back political allies. Many of these NGOs push progressive policies on immigration and social services, aligning perfectly with Democratic leaders. Broader trends in Minnesota, a 2025 House bill, HF72, tried to ban state funding organizations from making political contributions, spotlighting fears that nonprofits are using public cash for campaigns. Groups like the Working Families Party, active in Minnesota, advanced progressive candidates through affiliated PACs, through not via direct NGO funding, though. Viral exposes are fueling the fire with allegations that these outlets act as slush funds for Democratic agendas. Now, over in Illinois, it's even wilder. They're under fire for dumping massive state appropriations into political connected NGOs with accusations of straight up taxpayer laundering. In FY 2025, Illinois handed over $600 million to hundreds of NGOs, in addition to $72 million to chambers and $250 million to ethnic and religious groups. Critics like former Representative Gene Ives, through her Doge Illinois group, claim that more than $1 billion in taxpayer dollars flows politically connected. It's nonprofits with zero real accountability. This is why your housing taxes are so high. These groups handle services that could be run by government or private entities. The funds potentially indirectly support Democratic allies through salaries, advocacy, and backdoor channels. Specific players, outfits like the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, snag state grants for immigrant services while lobbying for pro-immigration policies that dovetail the Democratic platforms. As a 501c3, they can't fund candidates directly, but affiliated arms or staff donations fill the gap. The current administration's probes have targeted Illinois for fraud in anti-poverty programs, freezing funds over misuse claims, and the dark money networks. Broader flows through 501c4s and PAC-link NGOs back Illinois Democrats. For example, SEIU-tied groups active in Illinois pour large donations into candidates' campaigns through PACs. A 2025 congressional hearing called out tax-funded NGOs for advancing radical agendas like open borders, with Illinois front and center. In both Minnesota and Illinois, direct NGO to candidate cash is rare and illegal for 501c3s, but indirect paths are what's going on. It's just dark money. You can look at these PAC ties, state appropriations, scream foul play. For tracking, you can visit opensecrets.org or followthemoney.org. This isn't charity. It's a pipeline for keeping power in the hands of those who benefit from open borders and demographic shifts. It ties right back to migration machine. I mean, how did Brandon Johnson become mayor of Chicago? Just think about that. He came virtually out of nowhere. Democrats have controlled the mayor's office of Chicago since 1931, when Anton Cermak took office. As of January 2026, that amounts to 95 years. Brandon Johnson grew up in Elgin. I'm just saying, nothing against Elgin, but anyone who lives in Illinois knows that there is definitely some grooming that went on in that incident of him getting elected. Thanks for watching episode 8, part 2 of the Wiley Wire. Mass migration to the U.S. If this episode sparks something, you can follow us at the Wiley Wire on all social media platforms. We have episodes every Tuesday and Friday. And on Friday, we'll be covering the Olympics, the Super Bowl, and other trending news. And I'll tell you, talking about sports is going to be a breath of fresh air for me. This was depressing. I hope something gets done with this in these NGOs and 501c3s and dark money gets reined in. It's really taking a toll on taxpayers, and the money in politics it's just gotten absurd. Thanks for watching. Stay wired, and we'll see you next time.
The Wiley Wire dives into sports, music, politics, health, and trending topics for entertainment, info, and education. Listener discretion advised. May include mature themes, explicit language, controversial views, or sensitive content. Not suitable for under 18 or all audiences. Parents, please supervise. All opinions from hosts, guests, and contributors are personal and don't reflect our official views. Information isn't guaranteed to be accurate. Do your own research and consult qualified professionals.